Hey, welcome back. My name is Matthew. We're going to look at the Journey to Ungoro neutral cards. Let's start with the 1-drops. So first up we have the Emerald Hive Queen, a 1-mana 2/3 beast. Your minions cost 2 more. So it seems pretty clear to me that this is supposed to be a Zombie Chow replacement. It's going to help those control decks have something early to contest against the aggro decks. And I can't imagine you running this in any sort of aggressive deck, because making your minions cost 2 more is pretty bad if you're trying to flood the board early. So even though this is a beast, I don't expect to see it played in Hunter at all. Now we have the Emerald Reaver, a 1-mana 2/1 beast, battlecry, deal 1 damage to each hero. This one I think does work well in Hunter. First of all, because it works well with the Marsh Queen, and second of all, because it works well with the Crackling Razor Maw. You play the Emerald Reaver on turn 1, turn 2 you play the Crackling Razor Maw, and adapt your Emerald Reaver. The Battlecry, deal 1 damage to each hero, is actually fine for Hunter, because Hunter's hero power pushes a lot of damage. And we have the 1-mana 1/2 elemental, Firefly. Battlecry, add a 1/2 elemental to your hand. So this is likely to be a staple elemental in elemental decks, just because it gives you the fuel to keep activating your elementals on the following turns. The Glacial Shard, a 1-mana 2/1 elemental. Battlecry, freeze an enemy. This is the first time that we've had such a cheap minion with this effect. In fact, the only other one in the game is the Frost Elemental, a 6-mana 5/5. The Frost Elemental does not see play, but is actually fairly close to being playable. If it was a 5-mana card, it would probably be played quite a lot. The Glacial Shard is interesting. A lot of people seem to think it will go into control decks to try and counter aggro. I'm inclined to think that it will be more of a aggro card, because first of all, as aggro, you want to play these 1-drops, and being able to freeze an enemy minion or an enemy hero means that you're going to be able to prevent trades into your own minions, which keeps your board alive longer and lets you push more damage to face. And the Golakka Crawler, the answer to Patches the Pirate. So it's a 2-mana 2/3 beast, battlecry, destroy a pirate, and gain +1/+1. This is reminiscent to the Hungry Crab, which eats murlocs. This card is not going to see any play, because people are going to stop playing pirates, I hope. But if pirates remain very, very, very strong and prevalent in the meta, then people will start teching in Golakka Crawler as an answer to them. So I'm glad this card exists. I don't hope to see it very much, though. And we have a 2/2 for 2, the Ravasaur Runt. Battlecry, if you control at least 2 other minions, adapt. This is an interesting card. I don't know how good it's going to be, but adapt on a 2-mana 2/2 is quite strong. But in order to activate this, you need to have a way to get 2 minions on the board on turn 1. I think the only good ways to do that right now are Living Roots and Lost in the Jungle. So we would see this likely in a token deck, either a token Druid or token Paladin. I don't think it's going to see any play, simply because getting that activation is going to be very difficult. But it's a very cool card, and later on, we probably will see it once more card sets are released. The Rockpool Hunter, a 2-mana 2/3 Murloc, battlecry, give a friendly Murloc +1/+1. This is a really good Murloc card. The fact that you can buff a Murloc already on the field, or play it with another Murloc and buff it, makes this guy very, very strong. Being able to make your war leaders 4/4s, the possibilities for Murlocs are quite high. I think this is a strong card. It will see play if Murloc decks see play. And the Stubborn Gastropod, a 2-mana 1/2 beast with Taunt and Poisonous. This is an interesting card. If you play Elder Scrolls Legends, then you've seen this card before. It's a surprisingly strong card, given that it's just a 2-mana 1/2. You play this in control decks where you need to stall the game a little bit, because it's guaranteed to stop something from attacking you, and it's going to kill that thing. Generally, I would rate this card very high. However, Hearthstone does have a lot of removal options, so even against aggressive decks, this thing is not likely to stick around and kill any minions. With 2 health, weapon attacks are just going to kill this very easily, and currently all aggressive decks are weapon classes, so I like the card. I hope it'll see some use, but in the current state of Hearthstone, it's not going to be very good. Alright, another 2-drop. We have the Volatile Elemental. 1/1, Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to a random enemy minion. Again, if you play Elder Scrolls Legends, this is a card that has been printed in that game. However, in that game it only cost 1 mana, and it is pretty broken at 1 mana. I think at 2 mana it's going to be significantly more balanced. However, giving it the elemental tag means that it's going to be very, very strong. I expect to see this played a lot, especially in mid-range elemental decks. We'll see how good it ends up being, though. Maybe it's good enough to actually go in control elemental decks as well. Next up, we have the Ungoro 3-drops. We've got the Devilsaur Egg, a 3-mana 0/3, Death Rattle, summon a 5/5 Devilsaur. This is a very obvious copy of Nerubian Egg. 1 more mana, 1 more health. The upside is that your Devilsaur is a 5/5 instead of a 4/4. Nerubian Egg was very strong and saw a lot of play. I expect the Devilsaur Egg will also be very strong and see a lot of play. It's a good way to protect your board against AoEs, and as we've seen, there are currently a lot of area of effect cards in the game. Eggnapper, 3-mana 3/1, Death Rattle, summon 2 1/1 Raptors. This is an interesting card. It's hard to tell how good this is. If you're playing a token deck, this is probably a very good card, because getting those 1/1 Raptors, you can make take good advantage of them by buffing them up, perhaps, adapting them, things like that. There's also a Death Rattle minion, so you could see some synergy with some of the new cards there. However, 3 mana for a 3/1 is very, very weak. It's so easy to remove the initial body. I'm not holding out much hope for this card. I think it's interesting. I don't think it'll see much play, except in maybe some token decks. Alright, a Giant Wasp, 3-mana 2/2 beast with stealth and poisonous. So this is a straight upgrade from the Emperor Cobra. Losing 1 health, that's essentially a half a mana cost, and then gaining stealth, that's a full mana boost. So the Giant Wasp is much better than Emperor Cobra. Whether or not it's good enough to see play remains to be seen. Things like the Stealthy Assassin don't see play, but that's because they have 1 health, so incidental AoEs can clear them off. This is a little bit tougher and takes a full AoE to clear. I don't know what deck it would fit in, but I'm curious to see if it finds a place in any constructed decks. Alright, the Gluttonous Ooze, a 3-mana 3/3, Battlecry, destroy your opponent's weapon and gain armor equal to its attack. Now, this card is just going to straight up replace Acidic Swamp Ooze. It's strictly better. The 1 more mana is not something that comes into play very often. Mostly control decks will want to run Ooze, and the extra mana cost is not that big of a deal. However, gaining armor equal to the weapon's attack is incredibly powerful, since, as I said earlier, most aggressive decks are weapon classes. Gluttonous Ooze is a tool for control decks to survive against aggro decks. Very happy they've printed it. We needed something better than Acidic Swamp Ooze, and this is it. Okay, for 3 mana, we have the Humongous Razor Leaf, a 4 attack, 8 health minion who can't attack. This is very cool. It's something that's actually good to taunt up, so it's new synergy for Sun Fury Protector and Defender of Argus. I hope that we will eventually, someday, see more cards like Defender of Argus and Sun Fury Protector to give more options to use these cool minions that have the text can't attack. Of course, you can also silence Humongous Razor Leaf to have a 4/8 that attacks, but then you're putting 2 cards into it, and it starts to get a little bit hairy when you try and do the math on whether this is actually worth doing. Certainly, it's good to taunt up, but there are only 2 cards in the game right now that do that, so it's not going to be very consistent if you run it in your deck. You'll need to run silences and things like that if you're running Humongous Razor Leaf. Not sure that it's going to see any play, but I'm really hoping for the future where we have more tools that interact with these kinds of cards. Okay, the Igneous Elemental, a 3 mana 2/3 elemental with Death Rattle. Add 2 1/2 elementals to your hand. This is another elemental that gives you more elementals. I'm pretty sure that elemental decks are just going to play elementals every single turn without issue. There isn't going to be much thought involved in saving elementals because there's just too many good elementals that give you more elementals. It's a little bit ridiculous, in my opinion, to have an effect that is seemingly requiring you to think about it and play ahead based on your plays from the previous turn, when you're just always going to be playing those cards anyways. 3 mana 3/2 Murloc, the Primal Fin Lookout. If you control another Murloc, discover a Murloc. This card is going to be very good for the same reason that Netherspite Historian is very good. You play a Murloc, you play Primal Fin Lookout, and you discover a Murloc. Hopefully you discover a high-powered Murloc, but since there are so many of those, I think that won't be an issue. This card is going to be very good, and it is pushing Murlocs towards more of a mid-range role rather than a pure aggro role. Alright, the 3 mana 2/2 Beast, Pterodax Hatchling. Battlecry Adapt. At 3 mana, I think this is actually pretty decent. The Battlecry Adapt lets you choose what you need for that situation. It's going to be a very fair card. I'd expect to see this in a Beast Hunter or a Beast Druid. For the Beast Hunter, it would have to be one that is not trying to complete the Hunter quest, but since the Hunter quest is so strong, I don't think that such a Hunter deck will exist. So if Beast Druids ever exist, this card will probably be played in them. Alright, for 3 mana, we have the Stonehill Defender, a 1/4 Taunt, Battlecry, discover a Taunt minion. Well, we know that 3 mana 1/4 taunts are garbage, so is this going to see play? Well, Battlecry Discover a Taunt minion means that you can get a card that isn't garbage, and you choose from 3 of them. This is going to be a very good control tool. It gives you a way to save some health in the early game without spending card advantage. And if you are up against an aggro deck, you'll choose another cheap taunt minion. If you're up against control, you'll choose a big beefy taunt minion that will give you value in the late game. So I actually think this is a very strong card, even though on the face of it, it looks like a bad card when you compare it to the Silverback Patriarch. Another taunt creature, we have the Tar Creeper, a 1/5 elemental. I'm pretty excited for this class of cards. We have 3 of them with this flavor. This is the smallest of the bunch. It has 1 attack on your turn, but +2 attack on your opponent's turn. So you get a mana discount for this minion, because on your turn you can't really push face damage that well. You also can't take the trades yourself very easily, which is a pretty big disadvantage. However, on your opponent's turn, they want to trade into it to get past it, and it's going to have extra attack, so they're going to lose minions doing so. I think these cards are actually going to be very good, at least for control decks. I don't know about the Tar Lurker and Tar Lord, because they're much more expensive, but the Tar Creeper I think for sure will see play. Alright, the Thunder Lizard, a 3/3 beast. Battle cry, if you played an elemental last turn, adapt. So here's a card that is not an elemental, that actually benefits from you playing an elemental. 3 mana 3/3 adapt is very, very strong, so I expect this to see a lot of play in elemental decks, specifically mid-range ones, because this will give you quite a bit of board presence early on, and there are a lot of low-cost elementals that you can combo with this. Alright, Vicious Fledgling, a 3 mana 3/3 beast. After this minion attacks a hero, adapt. This is a very snowbally card. Every single time that this hits a hero, it gets to adapt, so those adaptations are going to build up really quickly if it stays alive. It's going to be a priority target if you're fighting against it. I'd expect to see this in zoo-type decks and other decks that rely on building a strong board with lots of death rattle cheap minions. Whether or not this sees play will depend on if those decks exist. But it's a very strong card, it's a very snowbally card, and at 3 mana I think it's very affordable. Alright, next up we've got some 4-drops. We'll start with the Bright-Eyed Scout. 4 mana 3/4, battle cry, draw a card, change its cost to 5. This is very similar to the Gnomish Inventor, which is a 4 mana 2/4, battle cry, draw a card. So you're getting one more attack with the, and I'm saying this in quotations, the drawback that the card you draw has cost 5. This could actually be a very strong upside as well. If you're playing a lot of higher cost cards, then this will frequently give you a discount on cost. It also guarantees, if you play the Bright-Eyed Scout on 4, that you're going to have a 5-drop to play the next turn. So I would say that this is actually a very strong card. It's card draw, which is always good, and it forces the card to be a curve card, which could be very, very good. We have the Fire Plume Phoenix, a 4 mana 3/3, battle cry, deal 2 damage. Now we could compare this to the Keeper of Grove or the Ironforge Rifleman. However, the Keeper of the Grove pre-nerf is actually much closer to what this card is. Now it doesn't have the choose one silence, but a 4 mana 2/4 is very similar to a 4 mana 3/3, and battle cry, deal 2 damage. This is a very strong anti-aggro card. It's also an elemental, so it'll go well in control elemental decks and mid-range elemental decks. We have the 4 mana 5/4, the Gentle Megasaur. Battle cry, adapt your Murlocs. Well, this card is obviously trying to push the Curator, so that you can play the Curator and draw your Murlocs and your Beasts. And being able to adapt your Murlocs for 4 mana is actually very strong. Murlocs tend to rely on the War Leaders to give them their buffs. Now we have another 2 cards in the deck that can do the same thing. So I expect this to see a lot of play as long as Murlocs see play. And I think they will. Mid-range Murloc looks pretty strong. We've got a legendary card, Spirit Singer Umbra. 4 mana 3/4. After you summon a minion, trigger its Death Rattle effect. Well, this is clearly the reason why they have moved Sylvanas into Wild. With this card, Sylvanas is way too strong. So in Wild, you can expect people to turn 10, Spirit Singer Umbra, plus Sylvanas, steal your big minion, still have Sylvanas, and a 4 mana 3/4 that you have to kill, so that their Death Rattles don't get even more value. This is a crazy strong card. It's going to be played in Zoth decks. It's going to be played in the new Priest Death Rattle decks. You're going to see it everywhere. This card is insane. Alright, a Stegodon, a 4 mana 2/6 beast with taunt. I don't think there's too much to say about this. This is just a Sen'jin Shield Master that loses 1 attack and gains 1 health. Okay, we have the Vorax. After you cast a spell on this minion, summon a 1/1 plant and cast another copy on it. This is going to cause some crazy combos, and just one in particular I think is kind of interesting, is you can naturalize your Vorax and force your opponent to draw 4 cards. So maybe this will be a tool in Druid Mill decks, but there are a lot of other options for the Vorax. This is a really strong, interesting card with way too many options to go into. And we've got the 4 mana 3/5 Talvir Stone Shaper. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, gain Taunt and Divine Shield. Well, this card is way better than Sen'jin Shieldmaster. True, if you didn't play an elemental, you won't get the Taunt or the Divine Shield, but if you do, you're getting extreme value in this card. And it is such a good card versus aggro, and mid-range, and control. This card is going to see play in every elemental deck. It's just a obvious auto-include. Next up, we have the 5-drops and the 6-drops. So we'll start with the Bittertide Hydra, 5 mana, 8/8 beast. Whenever this minion takes damage, deal 8 damage to your hero. Now this is very similar to Fel Reaver in that it is a cheap, big minion with a tag, may not be mech, but it is beast, with a huge drawback. Now, Fel Reaver may be a pretty big drawback, but losing your deck is not a big deal when every card in your deck deals damage. So Fel Reaver was a very good aggro card. I think the same is true for the Bittertide Hydra. You, as an aggro deck, are going to want to play this. You're going to be at a much higher health total than your opponent, and you're going to have a lot more reach than your opponent does. So playing this, the most they can do to it is hit it 8 times for 1 damage, which, let's face it, is very hard to do unless they're running Bouncing Blades in Wild. So 3 times 8, that's only 24 damage. So you still have a good 6 health to play with, and your opponent's going to be dead way before they ever do that. So very strong aggro card. Another legendary, we have the 5 mana 5/5 Elise the Trailblazer. Battlecry, shuffle a sealed Ungoro pack into your deck. Now the Ungoro pack costs 2 mana and adds 5 Journey to Ungoro cards to your hand. It's a little bit of a misnomer to call it an Ungoro pack because they've changed the rarity chances for the cards, and you're much more likely to get legendaries and epics and rares than you are to get commons. This card is very, very strong. It's a good thing that it puts the deck into you, or that it puts the pack into your deck, because if you put it into your hand, this card would be an auto-craft include in any non-aggro deck, because the value of getting 5 good cards is just too much. Because you put it into your deck and you have to draw this card instead of another card and then play it, Elise is fairly balanced. I think it will see play in Control Warrior and things like that, but it's probably not good enough to see play in anything else. For 5 mana, we have the Nesting Rock, a 4/7 beast. Battlecry, if you control at least 2 other minions, gain Taunt. This just seems like a pretty bad card. I don't see much reason to play it. If you want to have a big Taunt, you're probably not playing cheap minions, so you're not going to have 2 other minions on the field. I just don't see the point to this card, so I don't think it will see play. For 5 mana, we have the Servant of Kalamos, a 4/5 elemental. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, discover an elemental. This card is unbelievably strong. Elementals are very strong cards. I don't think we've seen a single bad elemental in the entire set. Playing elementals is very easy. A 5 mana 4/5 elemental that gives you another elemental, it's incredibly good. I mean, you're going to play this, and you're definitely going to have the elemental tag activated, and you're discovering an elemental. So you can discover whatever elemental you want with whatever effect you want, and the effect's going to go off. This card is definitely a 2 of in any elemental deck. Alright, moving on to the 6 mana cards, we have the Frozen Crusher. 6 mana 8/8 elemental. After this minion attacks, freeze it. This is a very cool idea. This is essentially a giant, but it doesn't have the reduced cost effect. And it's much cheaper than an 8/8 should be, but it can only attack every second turn because it freezes itself. That's a very cool idea. I don't know if this card will see play or not. It is really hard to evaluate it, but I expect it will, because when you play an 8/8, your opponent has to kill it that turn, because if it attacks once, your opponent is way ahead. And yes, it might be frozen for a turn after that, but that just means you still have to kill it. This seems very strong, but it's hard to tell. We'll see if it sees any play. Hemet Nessingwary, Jungle Hunter, another reprinted legendary card. This guy's a 6 mana 6/6, so something's gone to his head. He seems to be turning a little bit evil here. Battlecry, destroy all cards in your deck that cost 3 or less. This is a very cool card. I don't know what decks are going to use it, because you have to make decks very specific for this to work. You might be playing a lot of low-cost cards to supplement a high-cost combo, and by the time you get to 6 mana, you're good enough to remove all of the cheap cards from your deck, so you're only drawing your combo pieces. So you would be playing a lot of cheap things just to survive against aggro in the early game, maybe card cycle, things like that. I don't think you could really run this card if you're running a cheap combo, because you just can't afford to destroy your combo pieces. A very cool card. Adds some interesting ideas to the game. Okay, the Sabertooth Stalker, a 6 mana 8/2 beast with stealth. So this is obviously another take on the Stranglethorn Tiger. It costs 1 more mana, has way less health, but 3 more attack. Now, this is very cool, because you can play the Sabertooth Stalker and Hand of Protection, and then the next turn you play Blessed Champion twice, and that's a 2-turn kill, where pretty much the only way to stop it is Blizzard, Doom, Twisting Nether. So mages can stop it, barely, and warlocks can stop it, barely. I think that this is going to add a whole new range of OTK decks, where it's really 2 turns, but your opponent can't interact with it, so it's interesting. I'm not sure I like the card, but it'll be fun to see it at least. We'll get to see Hand of Protection and Blessed Champion maybe. That would be fun. Haven't seen those in play pretty much ever. And lastly, we have the cards that cost 7 or more mana. So let's start with the Blaze Caller, a 7 mana 6/6 elemental. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, deal 5 damage. Well, this is just a better fire elemental, and it's neutral. It helps that it's a 7 cost. You can play Fire Elemental and Blaze Caller in the same deck, and they will just combo off each other. This card is insane. It is another obvious 2-of in Elemental decks. I think that Elemental decks are going to be the new cancer. Every deck will be Elemental, unless it is Hunter. Well, very strong card. Not much more to say about it. We have the Sated Threshodon, a 7 mana 5/7 beast, Death Rattle, summon 3 1/1 Murlocs. I think this is a cute card. I mean, it obviously had a nice big supper, but it didn't chew very well. This card is not very good, but it's cute. Alright, the Storm Watcher, a 7 mana 4/8 elemental with Wind Fury. Also another fairly poor card. It has lots of health, which makes it slightly better for Wind Fury, but in reality you're playing 7 mana for what is slightly worse than an 8/8. It won't see any play. It's just not very good. The Volcanosaur, 7 mana 5/6 beast, Battlecry, adapt twice. This is a pretty cool card. I don't think that 7 drops that just buff themselves up are very strong. I don't think this will see any play, but I like the artwork for it, and it's a cool idea. Battlecry adapt twice. The Charged Devil Sword, 8 mana 7/7 charge. Battlecry can't attack heroes this turn. Very cool card. Similar to King Crush, cost 1 less mana, which is actually huge. The difference between 8 mana and 9 is very, very large, because at turn 10, being able to fit in 2 more mana can make all the difference. Now this is actually a control card, because it charges but can't attack heroes that turn. This is significantly better than Ice Howl, who can never attack heroes. I think this is a really good card. I don't know if there are enough spots for this to fit in many decks, but I hope there are, because this is probably my favorite card art in the set. Okay, for 8 mana we have our only dragon in the entire Journey to Un'Goro set, the Primordial Drake. 8 mana 4/8 dragon, with Taunt. Battlecry, deal 2 damage to all other minions. This is a very awesome card, really strong in dragon. I think in Wild this might make dragon decks just a little bit better. We're going to have to wait till we get more dragons before we see much of this in play. It is a taunt, so it might work well with the warrior quest, but I don't know if they're going to need an 8 mana taunt. The deal 2 damage to all other minions, well, that's comparable to Baron Geddon, who only activates once. Now Baron Geddon with 8 health would be much, much better. So it's interesting, it's hard to say. If it was a repeating effect, this card would be broken. It only happens once, so I think it's good, but I don't think you'll see much play until dragons get more tools again. And I'm sure that will happen in the future. Blizzard would not abandon dragons. Okay, 8 mana 5/4 Tortillon Primalist. Battlecry, discover a spell, and cast it with random targets. So this is a very mini Yogg-Saron. It's not a very good card. It's bad stats, a bad ability, and it costs a lot. The card art is cool. This won't see any play, not even in fun decks, I don't think. Alright, up to 9 mana, we have the Giant Mastodon, a 6 attack, 10 health beast with Taunt. This is a huge taunt, but when you compare it to the Ancient of War, which is 2 mana less for a 5/10 taunt, it's a pretty bad card. It is neutral, so other classes can play with huge taunts. I don't think it's going to see any play, but it is a taunt, so maybe in some taunt warriors. A huge legendary, we have Ozruk, the 9 mana 5/5 elemental with Taunt. Battlecry, gain +5 health for each elemental you played last turn. I just want to say, obviously, Blizzard has added a lot of taunts in this set. I think that's a good thing. In previous sets, they have not given nearly enough taunt options. I feel a little bit spoiled to have so many to choose from. Ozruk, very strong. You play other elementals, and this guy can be a 5/20 for 9 mana with Taunt. Now he's still weak to things like Deadly Shot and Polymorph and other such effects, so I think he's actually a weaker card than Soggoth the Slitherer, and he's about on par with Ancient of War. He costs 2 more mana, but he's often going to be much bigger than a 5/5 or a 5/10. I think that you will usually get 2, maybe even 3 elemental ticks off. Is it a good card? Yeah, I think so. Is it going to see play? Only in heavy control elemental decks. Before we do the last card, I just wanted to thank you guys for watching, and as a little bit of self-promotion, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. It would mean a lot to me and help out my channel. And the biggest card. For 10 mana, we have the Ultrasaur, 7 mana 14 beast. Blizzard wants to try and pack as many stats onto a vanilla minion as they possibly can, and see how big it can get before it actually sees play. This won't see any play, Maybe in the next expansion we'll get a 10 mana 14/14. It won't see play. Maybe in the next expansion we'll get a 10 mana 14/28. That's probably big enough to see play. But we're 2 expansions away from that, so oh well. Ultrasaur, you're cute. You have an island on your back, but no one's ever going to see you.